3. Carnal warfare. When one is young and single, carnal thoughts and passions can become a hindrance in the spiritual life. This is not helped by the complete lack of purity and restraint found in many modern societies. However, with God's help they can be overcome. We only need the help of the saints and a little practical guidance to avoid falling into the devil's snare. The first thing we must do when confronted with impure thoughts and desires is to try and divert our attention towards something pleasant but pure and good. Often our immediate reaction is to pray, yet sometimes this can make it worse if we place too much of a burden on ourselves. Not always, but in certain sensitive souls or those who are traumatized, it can actually have a negative effect. I will try and explain my reasoning. You see, pleasure, in any shape and form, often is used as a coping mechanism, whether consciously or unconsciously. And when one is very sensitive or deals with past trauma, carnal thoughts can often be deployed by the devil to try and make a person look towards fleshly pleasure as a means of dealing with everything. Sadly, if this is not dealt with early on and becomes an addiction, it is even harder to endure difficulties without some sort of happiness to divert one's attention. For the brain now constantly seeks out dopamine to help balance all the chemicals, in attempts to keep such a person from having a mental breakdown. This is why I say in some cases prayer, in particular prayer that is uttered with many tears and sadness, can make things worse. For rather than giving our brain what it has become used to receiving, that is a dopamine rush, it is instead flooded with negative emotions and feelings, which only makes our stress worse. Thus, if you happen to find yourself amongst this group of individuals, I humbly advise that you instead try and find pure outlets for your stress and pent-up emotion. One of the best things is to try and go for a good walk in nature, if it is possible, and provided the weather is pleasant. Hobbies can be helpful, too, so long as they are not stressful or mentally/physically exhausting. Church and prayer is of course necessary also and helpful. However, caution should be used, for as previously mentioned, it can make matters worse if done in a stressful way. Instead, when you pray, talk to God and the saints as if speaking to your closest friends. Try and go before the Lord as one goes on a vacation, that is, for rest and healing, not as an obligation since you're such a quote-unquote wretch. These thoughts of inferiority often make things worse as well when one is traumatized or very sensitive. Pride is one thing, but dangerously low self-esteem is quite another when dealing with carnal temptations. For if we think too badly of ourselves and believe our soul is a quote-unquote lost cause, how can we fight the evil one? We can't. It's as simple as that. Another trick that can be used to get the brain to process things in a healthy manner is to remind yourself that God's grace is infinitely more joyful than any earthly consolation. How can it be otherwise? Did not the Lord make all humans, whom the devil makes us lust over? And was it not God who ordained that marital relations bring forth pleasure and happiness? Yet in our weakness, the demons try and make it seem as if we are giving up something, quote-unquote, great, by restraining ourselves from sinful acts. However, this is complete foolishness. If such a thing were true, how could God be loving, when in the heavenly kingdom no one is given in marriage? So you see, these mental tricks can also help in many ways more than simply praying, for it helps us realize that these temptations are very feeble and nothing to get worked up over. And that is really half the battle, simply desiring good over evil. Indeed, though the devil tries to make us think otherwise, all the joys of the earth are as insignificant as little ants when compared to the bliss of Christ's wondrous grace. I pray that God grants us all victory over the devil's assaults, so that we may remain pure in heart and refrain from evil.